What's going on, my friends? Welcome on out to Behind the Energy podcast, where we dive into behind the scenes of DJing, entrepreneurship, and all the excitement in between. We got some friends, some cool people joining us, and a lot of fun stories. So without further ado, let's jump into Behind the Energy podcast. I'm going to do a little intro, and then we'll just jump into it.
Okay.
So I am going to look at the camera for a second.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, party people, listeners beyond my brother and my mom and dad, welcome on out to Behind the Energy podcast. I can't remember what episode this is, but I've got a pretty awesome guest in the house, and she goes by the name Emily Reichmann.
Hello.
Emily, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Emily was telling me how she's like an expert with podcasts and has done a lot of this before, and she's not nervous at all, and so it should be really smooth.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that story. I like it.
So if you've been listening along, I like to begin the podcast introducing the guest and kind of like how our friendship kind of kicked off and where our paths really started crossing, to provide a little context for the listeners as we dive into the conversation a little bit further. So with that being said, we're going to jump on over to the world of University of Utah. Emily, you graduated spring... No, you graduated spring 2019?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, you've been graduated for a minute.
It's been a hot second.
Okay, yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, you had a lot on your plate for your senior year.
Yes, I did.
Is your heart rate just like increased a little bit?
Yeah, just thinking about it, I was like, woo. I don't know. I'm not sure how I lived to tell a tale, but I did, obviously. So
our friendship kicked off at the U. Before I go any further, Emily, I want to get your perspective in how you were introduced to the Lausanne Institute, because the university is like our, common ground, but the Lausanne Institute is really what brought us together and our friendship together. So I want to hear from you and share with the listeners how you were brought into the world of Lausanne.
Yeah, so it was actually kind of by maybe like a little bit of accident, coincidence. Jemima.
Yes.
So she was the one that told me about Lausanne, and she and I were ambassadors for SLIC, so Salt Lake Community College. Yeah. And she said, hey, like, we're both transferring to the U. We love working together. We love doing this sort of stuff. I think we can do this again at the U, still get a scholarship. Uh-huh. Let's get school paid for. Uh-huh. And let's go for it. I'm like, great, Jemima. Thanks for looking out for me. And so I applied. And weirdly enough, she and I actually had our interviews like back to back. We didn't know when each other were gonna be, interviewing. So we actually like drove up to Lausanne for our interviews together.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
And so like we just kind of started that journey together, and then we got assigned to our different teams. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I did some reading on Lausanne, but I'll be honest, I had no idea really what Lausanne was about, what I was getting myself into. All I knew was like, oh, student leadership, scholarship, this seems like it will be fun and cool, and let's go for it. So
make a mental note here, because that's going to be a trend in this conversation as we move or as we progress into competitions.
Yeah.
You were working in the ambassador program, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Jemima, if you happen to be listening, I love you. She's amazing.
I adore her.
Doesn't surprise me that you two are friends prior to Lausanne. Mm-hmm. But you were working in separate programs within the Lausanne Institute as student leaders. And then was it the second year was when you had moved into competitions?
No. So I did a semester on ambassadors, and then they realized the ambassador team was maybe too big. And so they were trying to figure out where we could better place some people.
That's right.
And so I got moved to competitions my second semester.
That's right.
And it was Opportunity Quest. Again, not really sure what Opportunity Quest was about. Uh-huh. I got moved to the team the Monday before the Opportunity Quest, which is a competition that Lausanne holds. And again, no idea. And I was just supposed to help run the event. And that kind of like projected me onto the competitions team later in life. So
Okay. That does ring a bell now that you explain it that way. Perhaps for the listeners, a little bit more perspective there. I had mentioned Lausanne in a previous episode, and then Kathy Hajeb, the director of the Lausanne Entrepreneur Institute, was here for an episode as well, which is super rad. The Institute has multiple, I believe, close around 15 programs that are all ran by students, University of Utah students, on scholarship, hosting events and facilitating all the moving parts for other University of Utah students to attend, engage with, and really benefit from. And competitions, the competitions program was where our paths really crossed for the first time. Very similar to you. I remember sitting in the Lausanne house in a meeting with Anne, and she said, "Parker, how would you feel about competitions?" I'm like, "Sign me up." I didn't know anything of it.
Yeah.
I knew there's an entrepreneur challenge, like a big competition,
Yeah.
and really nothing beyond that. I didn't know what Opportunity Quest was or anything. And I said, consider me done. Consider me there. I love Lausanne with all my heart, and and you're not going to guide me in the wrong direction. So, said yes blindly, and I remember Anne had also spoken about you and said you need to talk with Emily Reichmann. I'm like, who's Emily Reichmann? And I remember just being so intimidated.
Oh, whatever.
I am being completely honest. Like, in our initial conversation, Emily, like, I'm like, damn, she's sharp.
Oh,
she
whatever.
can get stuff done. And here I am, like, an emotional dude and not as clear as I can be a lot of the time. And, I was really, really struck in our first conversation because I'm like, damn, like, she's going to really support me where I'm lacking and shine where I'm lacking. So we both jumped into competitions blindly. And that was one heck of an experience.
It was. And I mean, I don't know what you're talking about being intimidated, because like I feel like it was that flipped way. Because everyone, like, leadership was like, oh, Parker this, Parker that. Jemima was on your team. So I was like hearing it from Jemima. And then leadership, it was like all of a sudden I remember, because I don't think we really had much of a conversation really before we kind of talked about competitions. Like
No, not really.
No, like kind of just in passing, whatever. But I just remember sitting and like watching you walk towards me, and I'm like, what is Parker doing? Like, is he coming? Is he coming for me? Like, okay. And then you come and sit down and we just start chatting about competitions. It's like, oh, hi. All right. I guess this is happening.
That was before the interview, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Because you're like, what are your thoughts? It's like, I don't know if I have thoughts, but yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, because I had heard great things about you, and I just kind of wanted to. I think my intention was like, okay, let's see where Emily's at.
Yeah.
And see, does she want to make this happen? And of course we did, even though we didn't know exactly what we're doing most of the year. But we made it happen.
It was good. It was good.
It was. It definitely was. I don't want to discredit like the successful year that we had.
But yes, it was a little trying to figure it out.
Yes. It was, I guess one of the biggest challenges was like, how can I help people feel confident in their roles when I don't know much about their roles and I'm still trying to figure out mine. Like that was a stressor that was in the back of my mind for a lot of that time. And I genuinely think that our strengths complemented each other in the team. Also, shout out to the team. If the team's listening or watching, shouts out competitions.
Yeah.
Shouts out the OG team. Shouts out co-work and meetups. The OG squad. But anyways, that's Lausanne. That's how we initially met and worked very closely and got to meet at, was it 7 a.m. on Wednesdays or something
Oh,
like that?
stars, yeah. Well, I mean, we had like 7 a.m. mornings and we had like late evening.
Yeah.
It was all over the place. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, we had the 9 p.m. meetings because no one could decide on a time.
And we're like, okay, all right, this is when we're doing it.
Yep. Come to find out, Emily also works in the event industry. And that's, I guess, another channel in which we connected outside of the university in Lausanne. And how do I want to put this? The interesting situations and stories and dynamics and settings in the event industry is something that I think that people can bond over.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm making sense
Yeah.
there.
I mean, I think you bond over it, you swap war stories,
Yes.
It's also it can be a relatively small world depending on what area of events you're doing.
Yes.
And so then it's like connected, like, oh, this person, this person. I've worked, So it can be very bonding very quickly.
Did we ever do an event together?
We've never done an event together.
Yet.
Soon we'll do it.
Yes. Like the most elaborate fancy events
Yes, let's do it. It's about time.
Actually, I'm going to put a pin in that thought.
Yeah,
Separate
please.
thought. So what I want to hear a little bit about, Emily, and share with the listeners is what in your brain made you want to go towards the event industry and specifically event planning? Like, what was the inspiration and, what were those, early couple of events? What did they look like?
Yeah.
Give me a little introduction to that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm just reading my scholarship essays, essentially.
Okay.
So here we go, I guess.
Yes.
But I've been planning events from like one of my earliest memories of like childhood was planning an event. And it was for my stuffed animals. It was a birthday party. And I distinctly remember going up to my mom and saying that in order for it to be a birthday party, it had to have ice cream. So I needed ice cream. And she gave it to me. And I just remember being like, I didn't think that was going to work. But it did.
Ooh.
I got ice cream out of it. I threw this incredible birthday party for my stuffed animals. It was fantastic.
Was it one particular birthday or did they all have a birthday?
It was one particular.
Okay.
But I mean, everyone was invited, clearly.
Yes, of course.
It was a riot. So I don't know. I feel like I was probably like 5 or 6 when that happened. And it just kind of progressed. Like when it was my birthday parties, I was going into like the details and like what can we do to make this all like just like correlate with each other. So my birthday parties were always a production. Not saying that they were great, but they were a production. They were stepping stones. And then growing up, to be honest, I wanted to be a history teacher. Like that was what I wanted to do.
Wow.
I wanted to teach high school history. And then I was a janitor, a student janitor in high school. Were you too?
Yeah, for 2 years. Yeah,
dude. Yeah.
What was your route? What did you do?
So I had the best route. Like everyone wanted my route.
What did you do? What were you?
So it was upstairs. You basically did the math classrooms, but it was really easy.
Vacuuming.
Yeah,
Okay.
vacuuming, but we also had to like clean like the light switches and like the phones. Math teachers loved me. I mean, I'm not strong in math, so like that was the perfect thing. It's like, hey, like I need some help. I don't really understand this concept, right? And they're like, oh yeah, like let me help you out. So
I love this so much.
real great.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you were hustling. What was that? 14, 15 years old?
Yeah,
maybe?
about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
Anywho, don't want to distract you.
Sorry, no, it's all good. So one of the math teachers that I cleaned her room for, she was like, "What are you doing? Like, what's your plan?" And it was really cool to see how invested she was in like post high school me. And so I told her, I was like, "Yeah, I want to be a history teacher." Like, I had been for years in a notebook writing down lesson plans that I was planning on stealing from other teachers that I liked. I was like, "Oh, that was a really cool activity, stealing that." Like,
Wow.
and so I know I'm a thief.
No,
So,
no. Wow, as in that's amazing. That's awesome.
and she's like, "Don't go into history because the only thing people can do with a history degree is teach." And she was on the high school's like hiring team, and she said that they had like one or like maybe one or two openings for like a history teacher, and they had hundreds of applications.
Oh wow. Okay.
And she's like,
Wow.
"You're no matter how good you are, like you're gonna struggle with that. Like if you're gonna go into history, pair it with math or with science." Not my strongest suits, all right? And so I remember going home and just being like deflated and just being like, "Mom, like what am I gonna do? Like I was gonna be a history teacher." Like
And you
that
had
was
this conversation with her?
yeah, and I
Okay.
had this conversation with my mom, and it was like one day she just comes up to me and says, "You know what, Emily? I think like you should just go into event planning. Just you like doing it. Why don't you get paid for it?" And like I mean, a lot of people use that like, oh, like turn a passion into like a career and everything. But I really hadn't thought that event planning was a career
Okay. Yeah.
because I really hadn't seen that. I didn't know anyone. I hadn't really seen it,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Well, is it a career? Like, is it really?" And so then we met. We drove up to the U. We met with the program, like counselor and everything, and that was the summer before senior year. And
Senior year in high school, correct?
senior, yes,
Okay.
sorry, senior year of
Yes.
high school.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I was like, "All right, I think this is what I'm going to do." And that was it. That's what I was ever since. That's kind of how I got to here.
I'm trying to think or reflect back. Your degree was hospitality and
Yeah, oh my
hospitality
stars.
and what else was it?
So it was, so that it's a very long title.
Yeah, but I want to know. Yeah.
It's Parks, Recreation, and Tourism with an emphasis in hospitality management.
There it is. Okay.
It's a mouthful.
And what? Okay, how would you tell that to someone if they said, "Hey, what did you major in? What did you study?"
Just hospitality
Hospitality
management.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, there's an abbreviated version. So perhaps if you take just a moment and talk how you transition from, this was something you enjoyed doing, and this is something I'm studying, to this is something I'm actually practicing and gaining real world experience on. What company was that? Was there really a growth or working with different businesses in the event industry as a planner, as a coordinator and such?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was doing small scale events because I was like in high school because I was like in clubs and everything. So kind of getting my feet kind of wet.
Even in high school, you were doing that though.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
And I mean, a lot of my friends were like in student body. So like,
Yep.
you always get roped in after dances, right? And you're like, and I can't leave because my date, and like, oh, that's my driver. I can't leave until this is cleaned up. But after high school, I go to Slick as an ambassador, and we're doing college days, right? We're doing recruiting events. And I wasn't necessarily on like the planning aspect of that, but I was on like the managing of it. So starting to see how like that works on like that kind of like academically. And then it was during my time at Slick, and again, that's Salt Lake Community College, which they probably hate me saying Slick. But anyways, besides the point. That I was in a class and they were bringing in people to like business owners to lecture. And Russ Powell was one of them.
Small world. That's
Yeah.
crazy. Yes. That is
And
so crazy.
he came in, like, I just remember like walking into class and he had like music going. I was like, because it was kind of a boring class. And I was like, all right.
Something's different.
Something's different here. And at the time, my friend was getting married. And so after the class, I just like walked up to him, was like, hey, like, my friend's getting married. I love your business card, but also I'm going into event planning. So I'm just interested in getting your business card, for future stuff. And he's like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I love working with event planners, like on weddings, because it makes things go by so much like smoother and whatever. And there's a wedding planner that I know who's won so many awards that does an internship. I think you should do it. And I'm like, whatever. Like, okay, cool. Like, I'm busy. I didn't say that to him, but I was like, okay, like whatever. So we exchange information, and he sends me a note and says, so I've told her about you, and she's anticipating your application.
Okay.
And I'm like, I didn't even say I was going to apply. Like, well, now I have to. And I remember going to her website to fill out the application form. And I'm looking through her portfolio, and I'm like, oh my stars. Like, I can't do this. Like, she gave me permission. So it's Michelle Leo Events. She gave me permission to say her name.
Awesome.
But so many awards. Like, recently she just got re-recognized by Vogue magazine as one of the top wedding planners.
Wow.
So wins Best Estate, like, you're just seeing all these accolades on her website, on her portfolio. You're seeing all these like glamorous weddings, and I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah, I'm trying to like envision myself in your shoes at that time. Like, that would be incredibly intimidating.
Yeah, super intimidating. Her application is very easy. I filled it out probably like 5 times and never hit submit. So
that doesn't sound like Emily Reichmann.
And so someone in that class, she threatened. She's like, if you don't submit it before next class, I'm not letting you leave, and we're gonna submit it together. It's like, okay, well, I have like places I have to be after class, so I guess I'm submitting it. So the day before class, I submit it, and then I get an interview, and like, I was very lucky to be one of hundreds of applications to be accepted.
Wow.
And so that's kind of where I got into more of like the event industry, and event planning is through that. And then I stayed with her for, I don't know, like 4 years. So started as an internship, and then it moved into like assisting, like a wedding planner assistant and everything. And so it really transitioned. I was seeing like what day of looks like, and then it transitioned to like, what does the back end look like?
Yes.
You want those Pinterest weddings, those glamorous celebrity weddings. What does it take to get there?
They don't just show up,
no.
Like you're a guest going to this really elaborate ball or wedding or something. It's not like it just happens overnight.
No, there's a team. There are lots of people.
Late nights,
maybe a few tears.
Miles driven, many tears probably. I just want to take a quick step to jump back. This was initiated because you had took the initiative to just go talk to Russ at the time.
Yeah.
I just think that that's so awesome because you chose to put yourself out there and have that conversation. Just introduce yourself. And I'm sure something of this nature would have happened had you not done that. Yeah. But I think that's well worth highlighting on, and I think that also says a lot about who you are. It doesn't surprise me, Emily.
Thank you.
I think that's awesome. I want to be mindful of our time, but so I'm going to drill you with 2 quick questions, Emily.
Please.
I want to spend more time talking about events, but we'll wrap up here on events. Are you able to give me, the listeners, a glimpse of one of those either really crazy, like, oh my goodness, like this event was just so wild for whatever reason? Like, whatever the reason, I'm sure you can think of something. Yeah. Maybe just like like a from behind the curtain perspective, like, I never would have thought of this, and none of the guests would have thought of this. I can't believe this happened. Or maybe the most elaborate event, something that just blew your mind, or something of that nature. Am I making sense right now, Emily?
I think so.
Whether it's like a wow factor or like a holy
Yeah.
this just happened factor in your experience coordinating and facilitating and hosting events.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many. It's like which story to tell.
Which one is safe to tell? Is the
I know.
question.
Oh, I know. That's another thing I'm thinking of. All right. So one quick one. So these are both weddings. So the first wedding was I want to say it was like a Latina Persian wedding.
Okay.
So culturally, there was a ton of stuff going on. Very tricky to navigate. Just trying to make sure that for like ceremonies, because there were two ceremonies, one for both sides of the family, that everything was correct. And like, oh my stars, even thinking about it.
Where what was the venue?
Stein Eriksen Hotel.
Okay, yeah.
So
beautiful. And
beautiful, expensive.
yes, very nice.
Lots of very pretty pennies were spent on this wedding. But it was just seeing the cultural side of both families. It was a wild time. There were fireworks inside like the venue for dancing and crazy stuff. The other one was we nicknamed it a waste of cake. And it's a very long story and I know we don't have very much time, but least to say, we nicknamed it a waste of cake. It was very much of like trying to make things like very prestigious. And it was at the Montage Hotel. So another very nice hotel up in Park City. But it was just interesting what we had to do to present this kind of, I wouldn't say facade, but this idea that the bride wanted. And which we did. Whatever the bride wants, we did. Yeah. And but one thing that stuck out from it was she liked the design of this lady who did cakes, but she didn't like the flavors. And so
where's this going?
And so she had the lady come, and I think it was like a 4-tiered cake, so very big. But they didn't like the flavors, so they didn't want to serve it. And so they had Montage bake a sheet cake. So after they cut the bride and groom cut the cake, they serve it to each other, which only one tier was real.
Okay. Okay. Thank goodness.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We whisk it away, and then in the back room, we're all like counting with the Montage like food and beverage like staff. Like, does it feel like it's been enough time that we've like cut the cake to like serve it? And then if finally it's like, okay, now you go with your batch. Now you go,
Like you're literally, for someone who's not in the event industry, like you're literally timing this out.
Yes.
Yes, you're to make
everything.
Seamless.
Timelines are such a huge thing. Yes. Timing is crucial. Mm-hmm. So again, there's so many things that I could say, but it's interesting.
A waste of cake.
That's
awesome. So if I'm understanding right, the sheet cake was a different flavor that the couple liked a bit more, or
so it was actually made by the Montage versus this other baker.
Interesting.
And so she just liked the look of, or the design of this lady who did these cakes.
Wow.
But she didn't like the flavors, which, I mean, I've never had an issue with the flavors, but so they just had the Montage make a sheet cake, and no one's going to be the wiser. So we just whisk it out, and everyone enjoyed it.
I love your terminology there. I have to toss this in there. I did a wedding at the Grand America just this, I think, past summer, yes. And this cake, Emily, was close to 15 feet tall.
Oh my stars! There's no way all of the tiers were real.
I don't think all the tiers were real, but the head chef came out on a ladder after they cut it. Oh
no! Are you kidding
Came out on
me?
a ladder. It's front and center on this dance floor in the grand, huge ballroom there.
Was that on the floor?
No, it was on a table. But like literally, it was from the bottom of the cake to the top of the cake. It was anywhere between 10 and 15 feet. I'm not joking.
Oh my stars!
And he came up with a ladder and took each tier down, so then they could carry the rest of it out. so beautiful, so crazy, so just over the top. Matter of fact, the company of which I was working with it was over the top events. And
Oh,
that's how I was able to work that beautiful wedding. So just talking about
yeah.
cake, but perhaps Emily, to come full circle on the conversation and wrap up the podcast, if you could give one tip or suggestion to someone who was in your shoes, where you were at as a high schooler, entertaining the idea of going into event planning, considering your experience and the many hours and tears and things you have learned, what would you tell that person? What would you like to share with that person?
Well, first, it would be to talk to someone, find someone who's in the industry and talk to them. Because, especially when you say like event planner, it sounds so sexy and great and shiny. But you don't realize the long days, the inconsistent hours, and how hard they can be. And so if that's not really something that you like or you're okay with doing, then that's not the industry you should be in. So just talking to someone, getting more information before you spend who knows how many hours or an education going into it. Another one I would say is networking, because that's quite literally how I've gotten most of, if not all, my jobs, is by networking, just talking. Like with Russ, I just went up and was like, hey, this is what I want to do. And he's like, cool, like, let me connect you with someone. And that has been my experience, is that people want to connect people with each other. Especially I feel like in our industry, right? Like hospitality, it's all about like service. It's a very service oriented. So most people in this industry are like, oh, you need something? How can I help you?
How can I
help?
be of assistance, especially if you see that determination and that drive and that desire to grow.
Yeah. So networking, just talking to people, putting that out in the universe and like see what the universe gives back to you.
Excellent. So speaking with someone in the industry, specifically, in event coordinating, and then also starting to expand that conversation with other people in the industry as well. Networking, if you will. Okay. Emily, I'm sorry that it has to be so timely. We could continue talking. I'm sure I could pick your brain on a bunch of crazy elaborate events.
I understand being on a timeline. I'm all about timelines.
Yes, you understand being on a timeline. Nick's going to get mad at me because we're going over the timeline. That is a wrap for this episode. Emily Reichmann, ladies and gentlemen. Emily, thank you. Seriously.
Thank you, Parker.
It's been a fun reunion.
It has.
And thank you to the listeners. Muchas gracias. We will catch you next week for another episode.